But wealth inequality isn't being driven by immigration. Wealth inequality is being driven by the richer getting rich and richer due to Trump's policies, due to Republican policies. I think it's really easy to divide Americans and say you should be mad at your immigrant neighbor.
Adam Mockler sits down with Michael Knowles on CNN's Alexon show to cover a wide range of political issues. Now, if you're not familiar with Knowles, fair warning, if you've seen my past videos calling out Scott Jennings, Knowles is right up there with him when it comes to that smug, self-satisfied style. But instead of me doing all the talking, I'll let his own words speak for themselves. We'll watch it together. I'll jump in with my thoughts as things unfold, and afterward, I want to hear what you think down in the comments. And before we get started, make sure to hit like and subscribe. All right, let's roll.
I want to begin with my political sources. On the left, Adam Mockler of Midas Touch, whose videos routinely reach millions, and Michael Knowles, host of the Michael Knowles Show on Daily Wire, whose videos routinely reach millions on the right. Gentlemen, Happy New Year and welcome.
Happy New Year.
Good to be with you, sir. Nice to see you both.
Michael, after all the concern on the right about President Biden's health for years, are the questions about President Trump's health legitimate?
Alex, I have to ask you, do you imagine Joe Biden ever picking up the phone for the Wall Street Journal and going on and on about his unusual, eccentric healthcare regimen? Of course not. This is night and day. So with Biden, we know, actually, probably the most prominent anchor at this very network wrote a very popular book about the massive White House cover-up of Joe Biden's physical and cognitive decline. When it comes to Donald Trump, this is a man who says he hates exercising. This is a man who says that people are born with a finite amount of energy and he doesn't want to waste it on frivolous activities. This is a man who brags about his McDonald's input. And yet, what are we seeing from him? We see a ton of energy. The man barely ever sleeps. I was in the longest cabinet meeting ever in White House history with him. The cabinet secretaries were falling asleep. This guy was going and going and going. I think there are all sorts of ways the left can criticize Trump. I don't think that his stamina, his energy, or his health are one of them.
I mean, Adam, to that point, what do you say to people that says, look, he's still doing his job? Is there any evidence of any of this stopping him from doing his job? And in fact, he is more engaged than President Biden was, at least publicly.
Well, first of all, Trump has repeatedly fallen asleep in cabinet meetings, and I reject Michael's framing that he was transparent with the Wall Street Journal. What he said to the Wall Street Journal is that he is in, quote, perfect health. He's in perfect shape. This is exactly what Trump criticized Biden for. He is now doing the exact same thing. We see Trump falling asleep in the middle of press conferences on camera. We all see it. We see his swollen ankles. We see his black, bruised hands. He's reportedly taking 3 to 4 times the recommended dose of aspirin, which shows that his judgment is clearly off. His health is deteriorating far more than the White House is revealing. But what I find the most concerning, I think, the most concerning out of all of this has to be the insecure projection in regards to the auto pen. So he removed Biden's portrait and he replaced it with the auto pen. But when Trump is asked about multiple pardons, including the pardon of the Binance founder or even the pardon of the former Honduran president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, Trump says, quote, I don't know him, or I don't know the guy. So you can't in one breath accuse Biden of using the auto pen, then not even know who you pardoned yourself, which it's either one of two things. He doesn't know who he's pardoning on a daily basis, or he does know and he willingly pardoned the former Honduran president who trafficked 500 kilos of cocaine into the U.S. Michael, which one do you think it is?
Well, I think the fact that you're deflecting from the topic of the debate here, Adam, if you'll excuse me, the fact that you're deflecting from the topic of the debate, which is supposedly President Trump's health, to some pardons that you don't like, I think gives away the whole game, which is that of all the many events for which the Democrats could try to criticize President Trump, his health is simply not one of them. The man has an extraordinary amount of energy, even to the point on the bleeding and the aspirin. He says that he's taken this level of aspirin for 25 years because he's superstitious. And I believe him, because if that weren't true, it's a bad excuse. So people can criticize Trump based on all sorts of conventional wisdom, but his entire political mantra is defying conventional wisdom. It seems to be working out well. I think Democrats need a new song.
Michael, Americans may be more concerned with their own health care at this point. We know those enhanced Obamacare subsidies have finally ended, which means that millions of Americans have just seen their health insurance premiums go up. For Republicans, do they now own this? And is that bad politics for your party?
The Republicans don't own the healthcare issue, but it is a big problem for them. It's worth remembering that the American healthcare system, as we know it, began under Franklin Roosevelt, accelerated under LBJ, and was supposedly completed, perfected for all time by Barack Obama. Obviously, it didn't work out that well. But the American healthcare system has been driven by Democrats, but it's in a bad state. And now the Republicans have unified government. So it is a big issue. If you look down at all of the issues, Democrats are on the wrong side of most 80-20 issues. The one issue that they continue to lead on, however, is healthcare. And I think Republicans ignore that at their own peril. If the Democrats can keep momentum up through the midterm elections, it will be because of healthcare. That's what they bet the government shutdown on. And that was a smart calculation. Now, it didn't work for them in the government shutdown. They might have better luck in the midterms, but Republicans cannot ignore it.
I've got to be honest. I can't sit through a lot of Michael Knowles' appearances because I find him uniquely aggravating. And what really gets me here is that the very last thing he says is accusing Adam Mockler of dodging the question. Because let's be real. The first thing out of Knowles' mouth was a classic, "What about Biden?" He was asked directly about Trump's health and immediately pivoted to, "Well, what about Biden's health?" Suddenly it's this massive Democratic cover-up, this huge scandal. Meanwhile, he shrugs off Trump's lifestyle like it's nothing. Yeah, Trump's unconventional. He lives on fast food, pops aspirin, but look at him. He's crushing it, right? Then Knowles turns around and tells Adam, don't deflect to the pardons. But Adam brings up the pardons for a reason, because they point to something serious. Either Trump doesn't fully understand who he's pardoning, or he does understand and simply doesn't care. You can argue about which one is worse, but neither explanation is reassuring. And if we zoom out for a moment, while these guys in suits trade zingers and try to score points on cable news, the bigger issue is this. The entire administration operates in bad faith. Donald Trump is a serial liar. So when Michael Knowles holds up Trump's own words as proof of anything, that's a problem, because Trump's statements aren't reliable to begin with. Knowles also pulls another, what about Democrats' move when health care comes up, especially around the ACA and its expiration issues. Now, I've said before, the ACA should have included a public option. And who killed that idea? Republicans. They fought it every step of the way. And all these years later, they still don't have a replacement. So when Knowles suggests Democrats are the ones who own health care, I've got to ask, what exactly is the Republican plan? Scrap health care entirely? Because that's honestly what it sounded like. And his insistence that Republicans don't own health care is baffling. If they control Congress and the White House, then who does own it? If it's not Republicans, who's responsible right now?
Let's talk about it. Go ahead, Adam, real quickly.
I was going to say, I disagree that the government shutdown aspect didn't work. I can just speak from a personal lens. One of my close friends' mom didn't understand that she was reliant on these ACA subsidies until the government shutdown hit. And now she's been laser focusing on what's going to happen next because, you know, it's hard. When you're a paycheck to paycheck American, a 400% increase in your premiums could be lethal for you. So now she actually did see that 400% increase, and she's been hyper-focused on this since the government shutdown. So it did help bring awareness to the issue.
So that issue of affordability goes hand in hand with the healthcare issue as well. And now this issue of affordability was a big part of the New York City mayor's race. Now the largest city in the country has a new mayor, Zohran Mamdani, the youngest mayor of New York in more than a century, propelled to victory by voters who are fed up with the high cost of living, something he talked about often. I want to bring in now to the conversation New York political anchor for Spectrum News, columnist for New York Magazine, Errol Lewis. Errol, we've seen a lot of symbolism surrounding Mamdani's inauguration, but what is the biggest difference that we're seeing in terms of policy, how it actually affects real people?
Well, with less than 48 hours under his belt, the policies that we know he's going to focus on, Alex, are the ones that he campaigned on. Getting a rent freeze for the million or so rent-stabilized apartments here in New York, something that's been done before. Getting free childcare for the whole city, which is going to be a big ticket item. He's going to be going up to the state capitol to try and secure the funds for that, although he would rather tax the rich in order to get it done. And then free and fast bus service. Right now, there are a lot of people who take advantage of a half-price program that we have here in New York City. He wants to basically do away with that and replace it with just making the buses faster and free for all. So He's already putting people in place. He's staffing up. He's naming his deputy mayors, and he's getting started on the campaign agenda that he ran on.
So that's a very progressive agenda. Adam, you grew up in the middle of the country. You know folks in swing states. You know not just the folks on the left who watch networks like CNN. Is that agenda something that will help appeal to swing state voters? Are you worried that that could actually hurt the Democratic Party if that becomes the focus?
I think it depends on how this plays out. A focus on affordability is always going to be good politically. And if we compare it to Trump ran on a lot of populist outside of the box issues, but it didn't really harm people's view of him or make people view him as radical. Zoran also has some outside of the box ideas on affordability, but he's showing up when he needs to. I mean, he spent his first day on the ground talking to people about the problems that they're facing in their units. So Zoran doesn't have to be perfect or a perfect beacon of liberal policy, but it's refreshing to see someone who's addressing the housing crisis front on, head on. And it seems like Trump agrees. Remember, they met in the White House and Trump said that he and Zoran reportedly agreed on a lot more than expected. And one of those large points of agreement was housing. So maybe they don't agree on the exact policy, but there seems to be an agreement that affordability regarding housing needs to be a focus.
Well, and speaking of housing, he also signed some executive orders focused on housing, but he also revoked some put in place by his predecessor, including one that expanded the definition of anti-Semitism and another one that barred city employees and agencies from boycotting or divesting from Israel. Errol, how is that playing in New York?
Well, it's early days because he just did it yesterday on his first day. For background context, people should understand that the prior mayor, Eric Adams, signed a lot of these executive orders after Zoran Mamdani won back in November. So these were kind of symbolic. It's not like there's some existing structure that's now being torn down. What Mamdani did was come in and said, look, any executive orders that were signed after Eric Adams was arrested and indicted about 18 months ago, which was in fact the case, are null and void. And we'll find other ways to pursue some of the goals that the city wants to pursue. But basically, he was saying the last year and a half of the Adams administration was hopelessly tainted by the fact that he was facing federal corruption charges that he was rescued from in a very unusual maneuver by President Trump personally, it seems.
Yeah, and Michael, Mamdani drew a huge crowd in the freezing cold. He beat the entire Democratic establishment in the primary and the general. And even President Trump was impressed by him when they met. Is there a risk that Republicans who sort of saw him as their way to beat Democrats in this next year may be underestimating his appeal the way that people have underestimated him for much of the last year?
Mamdani is an extremely talented politician. There's no doubt about it. He's also quite predictable. The anti-Jewish executive orders could be predicted. This is a man who, during his brief rap career, praised in a rap song Hamas supporters. He's called to arrest Netanyahu. He opposes the existence of a Jewish state. So that's not surprising at all. What's also not surprising is the housing executive orders. The problem for Mamdani, though, is while he's calling out a problem that is important to many Americans across the political spectrum, he's ignoring the biggest driver of the housing increases, which is mass migration. HUD just released its worst case housing report about 2 weeks ago, and it shows that 60% of the growth in rentals nationally and 100% in New York owes to mass migration. And so you've seen rents decrease consistently year over year for the last 4 months. Why is that? This is 6 months into President Trump's mass deportation policy or moderate deportation policy. So the fact that Mamdani is simultaneously talking about housing affordability, but insists that New York remain a sanctuary state means he's not going to solve the problem. He's just going to build a big bunch of ugly projects that are only going to allow New York to continue to fester, sadly.
Adam, how do you respond to that?
I think that wealth inequality is a massive problem in New York and across the United States, but wealth inequality isn't being driven by immigration. Wealth inequality is being driven by the richer getting rich and richer due to Trump's policies, due to Republican policies. I think it's really easy to divide Americans and say you should be mad at your immigrant neighbor, but the cost of housing is rising due to wealth inequality, due to the supply, not due to immigration.
No, it's migration.
We should build more housing.
The report says
let me say something about that.
Errol,
the average rent in Manhattan right now is between $3,500 and $5,000 a month. And that's for about maybe 600 square feet. I guarantee you it is not migrants to New York City that are driving the prices that high.
What do you think is?
No, but
Well, we have a bifurcated market. We actually have a glut of luxury housing, but there's nobody there to take it. We have a lot of different problems. It really has to do with the cost of insurance. It has to do with the cost of the bureaucracy. Getting projects approved it takes much too long. So getting back to your earlier question, there's been one of the things Mamdani did sign as an executive order creates a task force to try and knock down some of the barriers that make it so expensive to build in New York. We've got to get tens of thousands of units built as quickly as possible. And it's really just a supply and demand question.
And we certainly have those issues here in Southern California
There's a glut of luxury housing, but not lower-end housing. So, yes, that is the problem. That's where the migrants are going. That's where the poor New Yorkers need to live.
All right,
I think whenever people try to pin something like the housing crisis on a single cause, especially coming from the right, there's always a convenient villain. There's always someone to blame. If it's not Democrats, then it's immigrants. If it's not immigrants, it's trans people. It's never treated as a complex issue. It's always, those people are the problem. But if you actually follow that logic through, it completely falls apart. Are we supposed to believe that if immigrants suddenly disappeared, housing prices would magically stabilize overnight? Of course not. That's ridiculous. Now, while I agree with Adam Mockler overall, I do think the issue is a bit more layered than just wealth inequality alone. There are other factors: insurance costs, zoning, supply constraints, financialization of housing, but that doesn't change the core truth. Bernie Sanders is absolutely right. The wealth gap in this country is wildly out of control. When roughly 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, that system is broken on its face. That's why Zohran Mamdani's message around affordability resonates, especially in New York City. And yes, it's particularly intense there, but people all across the country feel this pressure. Everything keeps getting more expensive: housing, healthcare, groceries, while wages lag behind. That disconnect is what people are living with every single day. One of Mamdani's proposals is taxing the wealthy, air quotes included, because what we're really talking about is around a 2% tax increase on people making over $1 million a year, if I'm remembering correctly. That doesn't sound extreme to me. If you're making 7 figures annually, you're not going to feel a 2% bump in any meaningful way. Now, I'm sure the people affected won't love it, but in terms of their quality of life or overall happiness, it's barely a dent. So this really comes down to zooming out and looking at the big picture. What levers can we actually pull? Because the level of wealth inequality we're dealing with right now is so extreme, it's almost hard to comprehend. Mamdani ran on affordability for a reason. That message lands because everyone feels it, New Yorkers and people everywhere else. I genuinely wish Zohran Mamdani the best. I'll admit I'm a bit cautious. Historically, liberal mayors in New York City haven't had great long-term track records, whether it's de Blasio or others before him. But still, this feels like an exciting shift. There's real momentum here, and he's coming out of the gate with a lot of energy. We'll see how it plays out. Time will tell. Let me know what you think down in the comments. They covered a lot in this segment, and I'm sure I missed a few things. So jump in, tell me what stood out to you, and let me know where you agree or disagree.